Hi students, as I always say, I'm going to try to make this PowerPoint or lecture as brief as possible and try to get some information across to you that I think will be helpful. So one of the things that I want to cover on, or two of the things I guess, is how to find a topic and narrow it to a research question, and then the broader perspective of once you get that research question, what do you do with it? What is the process going forward? So, I wanted to start with this brief clip. I'm going to have to close this window and open another one. This is Pete Holmes. He was a comedian many years ago. I mean, he still is a comedian, but the clip I'm going to show you is from Conan many years ago. And I think it's a great way to start off because he is, I think, funny. But one of the things that students tend to do sometimes with research topics is to grab the topic that they think is easiest and then run for Google and Google it madly and pick sources that just support their point of view. But Pete Holmes kind of has his own ideas about how reliant we've become on Google and what this has done to us as a culture. So I think it's kind of a fun place to start from. So I'm going to play the last couple minutes of this clip and then we can go on from there.
The joke is doing it as long as I can. That is the joke right there. So I have an iTelephone. Thank you. Which means I have Google on my phone. I'm guessing a lot of you do. I have Google on my phone now, and it's ruining our lives. I don't know if you've noticed, it's ruining life because we know everything. But we're not a lick smarter for it. We just know. You don't know something? Wait 2 seconds. You will know. Having Google on your phone is like having a drunk know-it-all in your pocket. There's no time for mystery or wonder. You're just like, how do they make glass? And you know. But the time between not knowing and knowing is so brief that knowing feels exactly like not knowing. So life is meaningless. I've literally been in bed in the morning alone, just like, where's Tom Petty from? But I feel nothing, because there was no time to not know. Listen to me. There was a time, and I don't mean to get all Andy Rooney on ya, but there was a time that if you didn't know where Tom Petty was from, you just didn't know. And you felt that yearning and that deficit in your being. And you'd go around and ask actual people. Like, where's Tom Petty from? I don't know. And now I'm impregnated with wonder. And then they go and ask people. Until one fateful day, you see a girl wearing a Heartbreakers t-shirt, you rush up to her and you're like, hey, where's Tom Petty from? And she tells you, Florida. And a wave of endorphins and pleasure and meaning would wash over you. And you felt something, and that's how you met your wife. Do you understand? Your wedding song was Refugee. Did Biz laugh? Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
So I hope you got a little tickle out of him. What I think, or how I think this pertains to us, is that I'm trying to get you to come up with a research question, and hopefully this research question is something that's interesting to you, that you feel impregnated by wonder when you think of it, and that it drives your curiosity when you're researching. It's not a question that you come up with because you think it will be just easy to research, or you feel like you already know the answer to, and you can find sources to. I understand that all that is helpful, right? We don't want to pick difficult questions where we're going to be struggling to find sources and need help. That's not a fun place to be in when your grade is on the line and you've got deadlines. But at the same time, choose a topic that is interesting to you, that makes you wonder. And don't just do one stop shopping on Google. The purpose of this assignment is to investigate multiple points of view and to ask questions and to become curious about this topic. So, one way in which we kind of narrow the focus of your research and help you to discern what it is you're going to research and write about is with a research question. So, this is different from just coming up with a topic, right? A topic might be something like illegal immigration, the war in Afghanistan, medical marijuana, euthanasia. Those are topics, and you can research them, but often there is so much information on those topics that you can find just tons of information. You can find the history of euthanasia. You can find one person's story about seeking assisted suicide. You can find the actual process of euthanasia and what goes on. And that's all valuable information, but sometimes that can mean that you're floundering from source to source, not really sure what it is you're looking for. Whereas a research question controls and drives your research. So if your research question is something like, is euthanasia ethical? Or is animal testing ethical? Then you are looking for sources that speak to that specific question. And yes, you may want to find those sources that talk about the history of animal testing or what is entailed, what companies do it, those kind of things. But you know that you also want to find sources that talk about the ethics of it specifically. Who believes it's ethical and why, who believes it's not ethical and why not. And so that helps give you focus. And eventually, because you are going to have to write a paper on it, that focus is going to help drive your thesis. So it helps you figure out, where am I going to actually what's the purpose of my paper? It's going to be to answer the research question that you present or that you come up with in this assignment. Now, that may change. I do want to say that up front too, that the research process is meant to be a dynamic process, and it's not unheard of or even unusual for you to start off with a research topic and for it to morph into something else. Now, I not something completely different usually, so you don't start off with the question of something like, should prostitution be legal in America, end up with, should recreational marijuana be legalized. Usually that's not as uh, extreme of a difference that you end up with. But sometimes students start researching a question with something like, you know, what is technology, is social media harmful to students' education or something like that, and they find that that's really too broad and that most of the sources that they're looking up don't really focus on that, that a lot of them focus on um, how technology affects communication specifically, not necessarily education, or how it affects relationships and communication, not just communication in general. And so there is an element of being open to where the research takes you. And that's a little bit of a scary place to be, again, especially when, like I said, your grade is on the line and there are deadlines. But I just want to let you know that it's okay to be there and it's okay to embrace that mystery a little bit as you're being curious. But we're hopefully going to find you a good research question. That's why I asked for you to submit two, because if one doesn't work out, you've got the other one in your back pocket. So please try to make your research questions different enough that not really on the same topic, so that if one is not workable because it doesn't meet our parameters, that we can go automatically to the next one and you don't have to go back to the drawing board and then we start corresponding and emailing and you get behind. So this is an example of how you might narrow a topic from a topic to a research question. So maybe you're interested in researching illegal immigration. That's been in the wind for many years, right? And when Trump was elected, especially, this has been a hot topic. Should we build a wall? Should we, ban people from certain countries? Should we crack down on employers who employ illegal immigrants? Like, should we just deport people even if they have children here and their parents? What is the best way to deal with illegal immigration? And so there are variations on this. Should illegal immigrants be deported? Should some illegal immigrants be offered a pathway to citizenship? Is amnesty ethical? You may not be familiar with that term, but if you are researching, that comes up a lot, this idea of giving illegal immigrants a pathway to citizenship, such as, they have to come forward, they have to pay back taxes, they have to go through the immigration process, they may have to serve some community service and become American citizens. So some people say that's the best way to deal with the approximately 12 million undocumented citizens who are here. Other people say that's amnesty, that's giving someone a free pass when they don't deserve it, they've broken the law. What should be done to stem illegal immigration? So you can tell that that's a very different question than is amnesty ethical? So you're going to be looking at different sources. They'll probably have some overlap in them. They probably both will talk about each other, but you're going to want a different focus for your sources depending on your research question. And should illegal immigrants be offered in state college tuition or have access to Pell Grants and federal money for college? Again, very different than being deported. Both these questions might have sources that talk about being deported and talk about college education and the Dream Act and things like that, but you want to make sure that your research question, that you're finding sources that deal with that particular question, especially in some issues that are very broad to begin with, like illegal immigration or technology or education. These are very big terms. So, how do we narrow the focus? So, the parameters of your research question are this. It should be interesting to you. That kind of goes with the Pete Holmes video that I showed you. I do want it to be something that appeals to you, and I feel like there are so many different topics and so many different fields out there that are debatable that you should be able to find something if you have any interest at all. Now, I have encountered a few students in my time who, through much consultation, I cannot find anything in this world that they are interested in. And if that applies to you, then you might have to fake it till you make it. But most students, even if it's something they think is non academic, like football or rap music or marijuana, then we can still find something out there that you can research and that is debatable. So you do want to make sure that you have a debatable topic. So sometimes students come up with topics and it's hard for us to find a debatable angle. They're like, well, I'm really interested in sleep deprivation. And I'm like, okay. So we can Google that. I mean, we could try to see if there's any debate about like the effects of sleep deprivation or um, what comes of sleep deprivation or something like that. We can try, but sometimes there are some topics that there's just not a lot of debate about. Or they phrase their research question in a way that's not debatable, such as how does smoking affect people's health? Well, there's not much debate about that. Most authorities agree that smoking affects people's health negatively, and in particular, they have the consequences of things like emphysema, lung disease, and cancer. Similarly, some people think there are debatable topics that are really not debatable when it comes to authorities, even though in popular culture they are debated on things like The View or Dr. Phil or something like that. For instance, one of the ones that students often seem interested in is, do vaccines cause autism? Well, authorities and studies have shown that they do not. There is no significant statistical evidence to show that there is a link between vaccines and autism. Now, this rumor or this conspiracy theory, depending, I guess, on how distrustful you are of authority, what you want to call it, it does persist and it is widely found on the internet, on blogs, and a lot of different communities. However, we're going to be researching what authorities say, and authorities are the people who have credentials in a given area. And terminal credentials, that sounds bad, but terminal credentials really usually mean the highest you can go in a given area. Maybe it's a PhD or an EDD or something like that, but they have a terminal degree in that field, and or they have experience, a lot of experience in that field. So they have their doctors, their nurses, their people, researchers, scientists, chemists, biologists, people on the front lines who have been studying this issue. So it's debatable. It has to be politically or socially significant. So it can't be just a matter of preference or something like what's the better party school, UF or FSU? Yeah, that may be debatable, may even be researchable, may be interesting to you, but it's probably not politically or socially significant. Um, I'm pretty good at trying to find something related, I think, for most students. If they came to me that question, I'd say, well, why don't we take an issue that affects students who maybe party too much, such as binge drinking. Is binge drinking a problem on college campuses? Uh, or what are the effects of, you know, um, drinking too much, or maybe researching with something like should campuses do more to combat sexual harassment or sexual assault, those kind of things. So trying to find a political or social angle to research. And finally, researchable, which probably makes sense, and this does speak to what I was saying before, is that you want something where you can find sources. You don't want a research question that maybe is politically or socially significant and debatable and interesting to you, but there's just not enough sources for our particular assignment out there. So that's where the assignment comes into play, because you do need at least 10 sources to begin with, and certain kinds of sources. You do need library sources. Um, and some of these may not be as viable. So, like, what are the effects of the war in Syria? I mean, now it has been going on quite a while, but it's still going on. So, I don't know if we can necessarily make an argument about the effects of the war in Syria when it's not resolved right now. Or something that's too small or narrow, like should Claremont build a shopping village at Plaza Colina? This was before they built all the Chevy dealerships and Mazda dealerships, and we became purchase a car on Highway 50 row. Can you tell that I'm not pleased with all that? Anyway, that would be hard to research given that we have to go through the library databases and find certain types of sources. Could we find sources on the internet? Probably, maybe even 10 about that, because it's the internet. It's wonderful. It has so much stuff. But I don't think we could find the kinds of sources we need for that question. Um, but something like, is standardized testing an effective method of assessment? We could definitely find 10 sources. We could find some pro, we could find some con, we could find some in the databases, find some in the internet. So that meets our assignment needs, and it is researchable. So, where can you find these topics? Well, you can start off by brainstorming, just looking at your own life and trying to think about, what you're interested in and what you might want to research. That's one way to think about things. So, I am a mom. I'm a Floridian. I'm an English teacher. So I'm really interested in questions that might deal with children's education. Like, are charter schools better than public education? Might be a question that I would be interested in because my children attend public school. Um, I might also be interested in something like, is technology harmful to student literacy? Because I'm a big reader and I've heard rumors and I've wondered about how distracting, and how we live in a culture now that really it becomes hard to be a reader. It becomes hard to quiet your mind enough to spend those hours reading alone with a book. All our social media is kind of built around the opposite of being alone with a book. And so, how does that affect our literacy skills? You can also go to certain websites. So, like this one, procon.org, I'll take you there in a second, and there are a couple databases that are useful. Also, if you have a favorite news website, especially the opinion pages can be useful. or our LSSC library website. You can ask a librarian to help you. So I'm going to go quickly to a few of these, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time browsing because I've already been more lengthy than I like to be. So news websites, you can go to like a well-known news website like the New York Times, and a great place to go when you get on these websites is maybe something like, if you scroll down, a lot of them have like the most emailed or the most viewed. This is recommended for me because I go here a lot, and so they trace what I click on, which is a little creepy, but it's also kind of cool. So I can look at things like, oh, op-ed. Op-ed means like opinion editorial, so that's good. That has to deal with it has to deal with opinionated writings, and so with argument, that's what we're looking at. And again, I'm not going to go into these articles, but Confederate statues in our history, right? So one of the things that's been debated widely lately has been, because of the march in Virginia, has been the idea of, should we take down Confederate statues or replace Confederate names on buildings and schools, because there is this history there that many people think is tainted. And it deals with the idea of kind of going back to the debate that's been around for a while, which is the Confederate flag a symbol of heritage or hate? And you'll find debate on both sides there. Trying to think if there's anything else there that looks exciting. But but yeah, you can click around. You don't have to necessarily just go to the most emailed or the most viewed. You can go to the op-ed page here in the New York Times and scout around for what people are writing about and see if anything interests you. And you don't have to just go to opinion, you can go to tech or wherever interests you and see. But this tends to be a good place to see what people are debating about, and you can read things that are interesting to you. Um, I clicked on this for a while, the What Does America Stand For? We asked teenagers because I thought that might be interesting to many of our students who are teenagers. Um, and again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can look through them and see if anything piques your interest. And if it does, then you want to try to turn it into a research question, and we'll get to that formatting in a little bit. I don't want to spend too long here. So that's New York Times. You can go to, HuffPost, NPR, Fox News, whatever interests you. If you have a particular major or an area you're interested in, there's usually a magazine to go with it. So, like if you're a psychology major, there's Psychology Today. If you're a nursing major, there are nursing magazines. And a lot of times you can go in there and try to see, is there anything that's debatable that might be interesting to me. So, maybe something like, well, I saw something before. What did I see? Oh, now I don't know. I'm sorry. But I was looking at something. Oh, I think there was an article somewhere when I was browsing around here that was just talking about um, whether or not the long shifts that are typical of nursing and of nurses and doctors are helpful or harmful to patients. So that might be a debate. And I've had a lot of students in the health sciences come up with some great topics, really specific ones about whether or not OBGYN doctors are recommending too many C-sections, or whether you know doctors are delivering um, premature babies and neonatal too early. I don't know, I mean, they've really gotten involved with them, and I feel like I've learned a lot about the health sciences and nursing in particular because of all our nursing or pre-nursing students. So it's great to see students who take an interest in something and then they research it, and I learn along with them as they're researching. So, finding a trade magazine or a website that deals with your particular major as you're going through is good too. It's a good way. ProCon is a good website to scout around on. So procon.org. If you click on that, that's got all these different controversial issues that you can click on. And the wonderful thing about this, I think, is that it really breaks it down in an easy to understand way. So, like, let's click on minimum wage. Should the minimum wage be increased? So it gives you a research question, and then it even gives you kind of a brief summary of what the major reasons for and against, or yes and no to the question are. And it really helps to give you like a quick synopsis so you can say, wow, if I'm interested in reading about this topic based on this web page, then I'm probably going to be able to use this for my topic. But if you get bored just reading half this page, then this is probably not the topic for you. One other, two other places that should be useful to you, and again, you can always come back if I'm going too fast, are two library databases. Actually, I'm going to start with just one. So if you click on libraries, click on databases, go to O, and scroll down. There's a database called Opposing Viewpoints in Context. Prompts you to put in your borrow ID, which is your XID, and your PIN password, which is your 6-digit birthday. And you should be able to do this from home any time of the day, just to get in here. And this database specializes in debatable issues. So it kind of like Procon, it has them divided into categories where you can just click around if something interests you, or you can just always go to browse issues, and it'll give you like a laundry list of issues you can click on. Please stop this. And so you can click around there if something interests you and say, oh, I want to find something controversial there. As you're looking, just be mindful because some of these are dated, and updated means good. It probably means there's something more recent that has gone on in this issue, whereas other ones, there might be, your sources just might not be timely. It might not be something that has had a lot of traction recently. So if you remember our resources and argument, we talk about kairos, that there's a time to bring up arguments. So if nothing has happened recently, it may not be for you. So if I say, oh, I'm interested in police brutality, and I type in that, a lot of times it will give you some prompts there. I forget what that's called when they generate those terms for you to look at. So even if you type in just an idea there, you're not sure and you don't want to browse this way, that can help you think about where you want to go. So let's say I click on police brutality. This gives me an overview of it, and then in these viewpoint sections, I get different viewpoints. I get, pro and con, yes and no, different opinionated pieces on this. And so these are your sources. You can start collecting sources right away as you're going through your issue if this appeals to you. So opposing viewpoints starts with an O in the databases is a great way to find a topic, find a research question as you're going through. Like I said, magazines, websites that interest you are another good way to find topics. Once you have a topic in mind, please do, if you're unsure if it's controversial, take it out for some exploratory research before you submit your questions to me, because then I have to do that exploratory research if I'm not sure. And a lot of times I have to vet these questions, and I will, and I'll try to help you form a question. And sometimes I know right off the bat because I've been teaching comp argument for about 15 years now. So I'm pretty well versed in what is debatable and what's not. However, the world changes, and I'm not an expert in every field. So I've had students come up with questions about farming or hybrid technology or cloning where I'm not very well versed. I don't read the news in those areas typically unless there's something major. And so I need to go in there and and take it out for a test bin. But please make sure you do that before you submit it so that we both can know, is this a workable topic? And how you do that is just easily, you can go to Google and type in keywords to say, am I getting sources back? Do these sources seem reputable or credible, not just like random blogs on the internet? And like I'm going to be able to find sources that are both pro and con on my issue as I go forth. If your topics adhere to all the criteria, you do want to compose a research question. And I've tried to, give you these templates here that might help you. A lot of questions are questions of policy or legality. Should something be legalized? Should something be instituted? So should a policy be changed or altered or added or removed? That's one template for a question. Another thing is if there's a specific problem, sometimes people debate how to resolve that problem or how to combat that problem. So, what should be done about illegal immigration? What should be done about binge drinking? What should be done about assault on college campuses? What should be done about, insert social problem? Is blank ethical? So, a lot of times there are questions of not whether something should be legal or not, although that might be the question, and then we could discuss whether it's ethical within that. So sometimes the question, should euthanasia be legal? Within that, we would talk about the ethical ramifications of it, or should animal testing be legal? Well, we're going to talk about the legality, but we'll also talk about the ethics. So sometimes whether or not something should be legal is a better question than whether it should be ethical, but sometimes this is narrow enough to give you room to argue. And students often like to go more broad instead of more narrow, thinking that will help them find sources and meet the page count. And I think it does help them find sources, but I don't necessarily think it helps them find meet the page count, because then they're confused when it comes time to write and they feel like they don't know what direction to go in because they have so much information that it becomes difficult to narrow their thesis and make a specific argument. Is something really a problem? So sometimes there are arguments about whether or not something is an issue or whether or not it should be changed, what's the best way to deal with something. There are arguments about whether something is effective and whether or not something causes something else. So, I keep defaulting to a legal immigration, but I do know a lot about that topic and it seems like most people do, so it's easy to talk about. Does illegal immigration cause terrorism, or does illegal immigration cause um, U.S. debt or something like that might be a question to ask. There are also questions about definitions. What does something mean? So the one I always am interested in is, what does it mean to be a feminist? There are people who don't like the word, women who don't like the word. They think it means man hating and angry and ugly shoe wearing. And then there are other people who embrace it, who think everybody should be a feminist. In fact, I have a t shirt that says we should all be feminists, because I believe it means equality, which is something I think everybody should want. But things can get sticky too there, and there's been arguments about many a pop culture person like Beyonce or even Miley Cyrus, where people argue, is this person a feminist? Are they fighting for women's rights, or are they undercutting women's rights with the way they dress or the way they act or the songs they sing or something like that? I'm not going to play this video because I think my video is getting rather long now, but one of my questions that I always find interesting and is still relevant and I think about every time I go to the grocery store is this idea of, is factory farming harmful? Should we embrace more organic farming, or should more people become vegetarians? Those are all kind of sub questions of, is factory farming harmful? And if you do have time and are interested in, you should go to thematrix.com and watch the video, because it's really funny and cute and informative and interesting and all kinds of good stuff. But I'm not going to do it here because I did want to move on to to talking about the process of the annotated bibliography. So once you have an approved research question, you start collecting sources, and I'll have a video on how to find sources in the library databases. You want to evaluate sources as you go. So in the library databases, that's not such a big deal. Those sources are already vetted for you. The librarians and the people that create those databases make sure that they're credible and reliable. But if you're on Google and you're using internet sources, that's definitely something to be on the lookout for, is saying, can I tell who the author is? Do I know anything about the publication? Are there posting dates on here so I know when this was submitted? Has this person researched? Is there a works cited page or a bibliography or something? Keep track of your sources. I know this seems easy to do, or maybe it doesn't seem easy to do, but for me sometimes it does. And I think, oh, I'm not going to need that source. I read it, and I think it's not going to be what I want. And so I close that browser window or I lose it, and then later on I feel like, oh, where was that statistic about, how many um, animals die per year, because of pollution or whatever it is. And I'm like, where did I read that? I know I read that somewhere, and I'm Googling and I'm trying to refine that source, and it gets lost. So if you think you have a useful source, there are different ways to keep track of them. You can email links to yourself. I've done that before. You can bookmark them. I've taken to emailing links because my bookmarks page is like so full that sometimes things get lost when I bookmark them. Um, you can start a file where you copy and paste the documents, the articles themselves all into a Word document. Just Control A, Control C, Control V, so that you have it all somewhere. Whatever works for you, I would say just find a method of tracking and please use it. And then as you begin to collect and read your sources, you want to analyze them. So take notes or highlight or however you can keep track of them on things like, what type of source is it? Is it popular or scholarly? Who is the author? So you might need to Google the author or click on their name and find out more about them. What credentials do they have or experience on your topic? What is the main idea or claim of the source? So maybe copy and paste it and write main idea or claim, or put it in your own words as you're reading it, which is even better. Support. What reasons and evidence do they give for their main idea or claim? What assumptions do they make? And then finally, this says figure out how you relate to the source and might use it. But really, I've articulated that a little bit differently in the assignment, which is how do you respond to the source? So, are you disturbed by anything in it? Are you pleased? Are you confused? Do you want to learn more? Just asking for your response there. And I think this other slide I wanted to show you, or a couple slides, is about the same. I just want to make sure if my memory serves me here. So the process of the annotated bibliography is to find a topic, compose 2 research questions and submit them, at which point I will approve 1 at least. Find the necessary sources that are listed in your annotated bibliography. Read and analyze those sources, so analyzing them for the required criteria or characteristics that are listed in that last slide I showed you and in your assignment. Create citations for those sources, and I show you how to do that in another video. Create annotations for those sources, so that's the paragraph beneath. Submit a rough draft of your annotated bibliography where you get peer feedback and my feedback, and then turn in the final draft of your annotated bibliography. From there, we'll go on to the next assignment, the research argument, which will be on the same topic, but that will be where you take a stance on it. So I hope this video has been informative and not too long, and please reach out if you have any questions.